What if the person you trust most is the one quietly destroying your life? Sophie didn't mean to say it out loud. The words slipped from her lips like a secret too heavy to hold. She was only 8, but the weight of what she'd uncovered made her feel 100 years older. She sat in the back corner of the surveillance room, her small fingers wrapped tightly around her tablet. Her heartbeat wasn't just pounding, it was roaring. Upstairs, the woman who used to smile at her like a mother was planting the final steps of a betrayal, so calculated it could ruin everything Nathan had ever built. And Nathan, her only chance at a real family, was just now realizing the truth. The danger hadn't come from outside. It had been sleeping in his home. The silence between them was thick. Fear, fury, disbelief, all tangled together like wires in a machine about to explode. But if you stay with this story, you'll witness the moment everything breaks wide open. What Sophie does next will shock you, and the truth they uncover will change every single life involved. Are you ready for the truth hidden in plain sight? Stay. Something unthinkable is about to happen. Sophie didn't speak unless she absolutely had to. 8 years old with dark curls, always a little too wild, and eyes that noticed everything she knew from experience, that words weren't always safe. But watching could save you. Watching had kept her out of trouble in foster homes, taught her when to smile, when to disappear, and when to hold her breath so no one remembered she was there. Now tucked just beyond the doorway of a high-tech home office, with a floor-to-ceiling glass wall that overlooked the English countryside, Sophie watched again. Her small hands clutched the edge of the mahogany door frame, her bare feet silent against the hardwood. Inside, Nathan Whitaker, the billionaire cybersecurity mogul, was locked in an intense Zoom meeting, his headset snug his fingers, moving across the keyboard like lightning. The room hummed with quiet power machines blinking encrypted firewalls defending invisible worlds. Nathan's voice was clipped, analytical, immersed in jargon. Sophie only half understood. She'd heard him speak to corporate boards about digital fortresses and data architecture. But today her attention wasn't on what he said. It was on something off. Above Nathan's head, hanging from the wall, was a painting, a romantic landscape of green hills and wildflowers. It was the only soft thing in the entire space, a stark contrast to the steel and screens. Vanessa Blake, Nathan's girlfriend, had brought it over a few weeks ago. "This room needs beauty," she had purred, brushing her fingers along Nathan's sleeve. Every genius needs something alive to look at. Sophie had watched that moment too, and now something behind that painting blinked. Not a reflection, not a shadow. A tiny red light pulsing like a hidden heartbeat. She'd seen it more than once, only at night, only when Nathan wasn't around. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nathan didn't see her. Her chest tightened. She didn't like speaking up. Most grown-ups looked through her, even the ones who said they cared. Even Nathan. He wasn't cruel, just distant, focused. Like Sophie was another item on his to-do list filed somewhere between review network protocols and donate to orphan charity. He wasn't a bad man, just unreachable. Still, what she'd seen, it couldn't wait. She stepped forward, tugging lightly on his sleeve. 1 second, he muttered without looking, lifting a finger. She hesitated, then tugged again, harder this time. "Sweetheart, I'm almost." She leaned close and whispered, just above a breath, "There's a camera in your office, but it's not yours." Silence. Absolute. Nathan stopped mid-sentence. The executive on the call kept talking, unaware that the world had just tilted beneath Nathan's feet. He slowly reached forward, clicked to end the call, and then turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time. "What did you say?" Sophie pointed at the painting. "I saw it blinking. At night, when no one's here." Nathan's mouth went dry. The painting, Vanessa's painting. Suddenly, 100 small details clicked together: Vanessa's sudden interest in his schedule, her random visits with coffee during late-night coding, the way she insisted on helping clean his office, even though he had a professional team. "How long have you been watching it?" he asked, his voice strained. "Since she hung it up. I check signals at night when I can't sleep." "That one, it's not connected to your network." Nathan blinked. Sophie, who barely spoke, who was supposed to be just the quiet granddaughter of Margaret, his longtime part-time housekeeper, This child had uncovered something his entire team had missed. He stared at her dumbfounded as she crossed the room, grabbed her battered tablet from the hallway, and began scanning. "I learned this from you," she said simply, her small fingers dancing over the screen. "I watched how you worked on the router. I downloaded an app. I wanted to know why my room felt buzzy." Her screen lit up with signals, a digital map of his mansion's network. "There," she said, pointing to several red dots. "This one's behind the painting. This one's in the living room inside the crystal vase Vanessa brought you. And this one's in your nightstand." Nathan's heart nearly stopped. A knot formed in his throat as he stared at the screen. Sophie's calm, focused voice barely registered. All he could hear was the roaring in his ears. Every conversation, every confidential project, every moment of privacy gone. His prototype, the one worth over $300 million. Still in shock, he murmured, "Do you think Vanessa's behind this?" Sophie hesitated, then said something that chilled him even more. "I think she's not working alone." Nathan's chest tightened. "What do you mean she talks to someone when you're not here?" "A man. He wears a suit. Sometimes he meets her here. Sometimes she whispers with him on the phone. I heard him once say, 'We need the data before the launch.'" She glanced up, eyes wary. "I think he's from your company." Nathan's mind reeled. Sophie was describing Derek Sloan, his CFO and best friend. It couldn't be. Could it? He sank into his chair. "Sophie, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because," she said softly, "grown-ups never believe kids like me, especially not the ones who clean the floors." That shattered something inside him. He looked at this quiet, sharp-eyed child and saw more courage than he'd seen in most boardrooms. She had been living in the background of his life, quietly trying to protect it, and he hadn't seen her at all. "I believe you," he said finally. "I'm sorry I didn't before." She looked up. "So, what do we do now?" Nathan stared at the blinking signals on her screen, then at the painting on the wall still pretending to be art. He took a deep breath. "We get to work. Together." Because this time he wouldn't dismiss the whisper. This time he was listening. "And you? If you were Nathan, would you have believed Sophie the first time? If this story made you feel something, please drop a heart and share your thoughts." For the rest of the day, Nathan couldn't sit still. The screen in Sophie's small hands had flipped his entire world upside down. Each red dot she pointed to wasn't just a blinking signal, it was betrayal in physical form. Quiet, insidious, and sitting right under his nose. He hadn't spoken to Vanessa since, not even a text. Sophie had gone home with Margaret for the evening, her face unreadable as she left. But Nathan hadn't missed the subtle flicker of fear in her eyes. Fear not of being caught, but of being ignored again. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the blinking light behind the painting. He saw Sophie, small and determined, whispering a truth he hadn't been ready to hear. And he saw Vanessa's smile, the one that had once felt like sunlight and now felt like poison wrapped in silk. The next morning, Margaret arrived earlier than usual. She didn't say anything at first, just walked into the kitchen like she had every Tuesday for the past 15 years. Nathan was already there, hunched over a mug of cold coffee. She studied him for a long moment before she finally asked, "How much do you know not enough?" He replied, his voice rough, but too much to stay silent. Then softly, "Did you know?" Margaret's eyes didn't flinch. "I had suspicions, but suspicions are dangerous when they're pointed at someone with power and charm, and I didn't have proof." "But Sophie did," Nathan said, more to himself than to her. Margaret set down her bag and looked him dead in the eye. "That girl sees everything, Nathan. She's been overlooked so long, she's learned to find answers in silence. That's how she survived." Nathan felt that hit harder than any boardroom attack. "I want to talk to her," he said. "I need her help." "You'll have it," Margaret replied. "But if you doubt her again, even once, you'll lose her." That afternoon, Sophie returned. She carried her tablet like it was armor. Her face was guarded, distant. Nathan knelt to her level. "I was wrong," he said. "You tried to protect me and I didn't listen. But I'm listening now. I need you to show me everything." Sophie hesitated, then handed him the device. "This," she said, "is where it gets worse." She opened her signal map again. But now new data flooded the screen lines of intercepted transmissions, timestamps, and a pattern of activity too complex for any average child to have uncovered. Nathan couldn't believe what he was seeing. "You did all this by yourself?" She nodded. "I used the surveillance devices they planted. They're sending data somewhere. I think I can find out where." Nathan stared at her in awe. "How do you even know how to?" "I watched you. I read your books. And I taught myself." He felt a wave of guilt and something deeper pride. Sophie zoomed in on a file structure. "This one here, Vanessa's device. It's not just transmitting files. It's logging every word spoken in this house, every conversation, every password you've ever said out loud. And who's receiving it? I traced it to a shell company. But when I followed the digital trail," she paused, then looked up at him, "it leads to Helix Corp." Nathan's heart nearly stopped. Helix Corp, his biggest competitor, the same company that had tried to buy out his patent last year, the one he'd refused in front of a dozen shareholders. Suddenly, things began to snap into place. Vanessa's sudden interest in him, her perfectly timed appearances, her charm, her curiosity masked as affection. This wasn't love. This was strategy. But then Sophie dropped another bomb. "She's not alone." Nathan froze. "I heard her on a call 2 nights ago," Sophie whispered. "She was talking to someone. I only caught one name. Derek." Nathan felt the air leave his lungs. Derek Sloan, his CFO, his best friend. The man who had stood beside him since the company's infancy. The man who knew every password, every product cycle, every vulnerability in their infrastructure. No, Nathan said. He would never, but the moment the words left his mouth, he realized how hollow they sounded. Hadn't Derek been unusually distant lately? A little too curious about Nathan's off-the-grid algorithm? Hadn't he been the one to suggest they store development logs on the shared server? His stomach turned. "He betrayed you," Sophie said quietly, "just like Vanessa." Nathan stood slowly, his thoughts spiraling. The man he trusted, the woman he loved. Both had been dismantling his life from the inside. "What else have you found?" Sophie opened another tab. "There's a scheduled event, something called Final Extraction. It's in 3 days. Based on the traffic, I think they're planning to download your full prototype and plant fake documents to make it look like you sold it yourself." Nathan stared at the screen. "Character assassination," he murmured. "They're not just stealing from me. They're planning to destroy me. And make it look like you were the traitor," Sophie added. Nathan turned away, his hands braced on the counter. His mind raced with fury, fear, and something he hadn't felt in years, paralysis. For the first time in his career, he didn't know what to do. Sophie approached slowly. "I can help," she said. "But you have to let me. You can't treat me like a kid anymore. Not for this." He turned to her. She was trembling, but her eyes were fierce. "I've already been part of this," she said. "They didn't see me. That's why I saw them. And I've kept myself safe all this time. I can keep doing it." Nathan's jaw clenched. Everything inside him wanted to say no, to protect her, to shelter her. But she was right. She wasn't just involved, she was essential. And maybe, just maybe, the one person he could trust to see it all clearly. He nodded. "We fight together." And for the first time, Sophie smiled. A real smile. The kind that said she knew she wasn't alone anymore. "How about you? If you were Sophie, would you have stepped forward or stayed quiet to stay safe? Let me know what you'd do in the comments, and if this part gripped your heart, drop a heart to support the story. The days that followed moved like a ticking clock, steady, relentless, and full of weight. Nathan Whitaker had always thrived under pressure. Boardroom battles, tech launches, even industry smear campaigns, he'd faced them all. But nothing had prepared him for this, a betrayal orchestrated from inside his own home. Now everything he'd built, his company, his name, his freedom, was on the edge of collapse. And yet he had never felt more certain of what to do, because this time he wasn't fighting alone. Sophie sat beside him in the surveillance room they'd built overnight in the basement. Her tablet opened, streams of code flowing across the screen like a river of secrets. Margaret kept watch from upstairs, her seasoned calm keeping the household steady as the trap slowly closed around those who thought they had already won. The plan was simple. Let them play their hand. They would wait until Vanessa Blake believed Nathan had dropped his guard. Let her access the false files they had planted decoy data wrapped in encrypted tracking code. Let Derek Sloan, his once-trusted CFO, forge the final transfer from Nathan's account to make the theft look like a willing sale. Let them initiate their so-called final extraction. And while they did, every word, every keystroke, every connection would be mirrored and sent to a secure server the FBI was already monitoring. The trap was set. At exactly 10:45 p.m., the first move was made. Margaret knocked once on the doorframe. "She's here," she whispered. Vanessa had returned from her yoga retreat a day earlier than planned. She smiled warm as ever, claiming she just missed being home. But there was something different in her step tonight. A sharpness, a purpose. Nathan felt it. He played his role perfectly, greeted her with a tired smile, pretended not to notice when she slipped away into his office, pretended not to see her checking her reflection, not in the mirror, but in the shiny surface of the screen. Pretended not to know that she was watching to make sure she wasn't being watched, but this time she was. From the hidden monitors downstairs, Nathan, Sophie, and Margaret watched as Vanessa pulled a sleek black device from her handbag and slid it behind the painting on the wall. She wasn't just retrieving data, she was uploading a command. Within seconds, the blinking light turned steady blue. "They're going live," Sophie whispered. Her hands trembled slightly over the keys. "She's connecting to an offshore server." Margaret moved behind her, gently placing a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "You've got this, love." Nathan stared at the screen. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat. Then came the message from Derek. A single text flashed across Vanessa's phone. "Transfer complete. Delete all local traces. Get out." Vanessa's expression didn't change. She didn't panic. She moved like a professional, graceful, calculated. She thought she was in control. Until the moment she turned around and saw Nathan standing in the doorway. Her lips parted in a perfect gasp of surprise. "Nathan," she said, breathless. "What are you doing? I could ask you the same," he replied calmly. "Or, should I call you by your real name? Because the FBI will." For the first time, her face cracked. "You don't know what you're getting into," she hissed, stepping backward. "You think you've won. You have no idea who you're up against." Nathan held his ground. "Actually, I do. And you were sloppy. You underestimated the one person you should have been afraid of." She looked confused until Sophie stepped into the room. The expression on Vanessa's face was instant fury. "You," she snapped. "You little careful," Nathan warned. "You're talking to the girl who just dismantled your entire operation." Sirens pierced the night. Vanessa froze. Moments later, FBI agents swarmed the property. Margaret calmly opened the door for them. Derek Sloan was arrested at his apartment the same hour, caught red-handed with forged documents, wire transfers, and voice recordings implicating him as the inside man behind the entire Helix Corp conspiracy. The nightmare was over, and yet, something deeper remained. In the days that followed, the house felt quieter. Not empty, but different. Sophie barely spoke. Even with Vanessa gone and the danger past, something inside her still held its breath. One evening, Nathan found her alone in the library, curled up in the big leather chair where she had once hidden behind her tablet. He sat beside her silently for a long time before asking, "Why haven't you smiled, Sophie?" She looked down. Her voice was soft. "Because it's not over." Nathan blinked. "What do you mean? I've been through this before. People say they care. Then when the chaos ends, they forget. They go back to normal. And I go back to being invisible." Nathan swallowed hard. He thought about the girl who had seen what no one else saw, who risked being dismissed, ignored, even punished just to tell him the truth, who cracked open a conspiracy with nothing but a second-hand tablet and more courage than most adults. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I was going to wait," he said, "but I think you need to see this now." Inside was an official letter from the Department of Justice, formally recognizing Sophie's contribution to the case. She was being honored with a civilian commendation for exceptional intelligence and bravery, but that wasn't what made her breath catch. Alongside it was a document with Nathan's signature. Adoption papers. "I want to make it official," he said, his voice rough. Not because I owe you, not because you saved me, but because I see you now, and I don't ever want you to feel invisible again. Sophie stared at the paper for a long time. Then slowly her lips curved into something he hadn't seen before, a real smile. One that reached her eyes. One that finally felt safe. Months passed. The story made headlines across Europe and the States. But Nathan didn't care for the fame. What mattered was what came after. He stepped down from day-to-day operations at his company and launched the Sophie Foundation, an initiative to protect vulnerable children from digital exploitation and to educate families on the invisible dangers of tech-driven manipulation. Sophie became its youngest board advisor. She gave talks, taught workshops, built tools. She wasn't a background character anymore. She was the voice people listened to. And one afternoon, while speaking at a school, she was asked, "What made you brave enough to speak up?" She paused and said, "Because I knew if I didn't, no one would ever hear the truth." And that truth, spoken softly by a once-forgotten girl, had changed everything. If you were in Sophie's place, would you have risked everything to expose the truth? Do you believe trust must be earned even within families? What did you think of this story? Did it move you, surprise you, make you reflect? Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If you love this story, comment number 3 below. If it was just okay, comment number 2. And if you weren't satisfied, feel free to comment number 1. Your feedback matters. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, leave a heart, and share this story with someone who needs to believe in second chances. We'll see you in the next emotional story.